Who would be backing up Giannis if they did get Giannis? That's something I will give Dariq Whitehead a ton of credit for. Is Dariq Whitehead, Killian Hayes, and Timme were my tops, and might find some time on while. Killian Hayes, I think Killian Hayes played very well.
Welcome to the NBA 2K G League show. I am your host, Varun Chari, and welcome to the show. So, this summer, because we don't have a G League going on right now, I decided for the channel I wanted to do a summer series of interviews, finding different people who do stuff with the G League, whether it's reporters, maybe like sideline reporters, trainers, agents, players, GMs. Like, I think one of the best parts about following the G League, I'd get to the Capital City Go-Go game like an hour before the game even starts, an hour before tip-off, and I'm just looking at everything that gets put together when it comes to a game. And there's so many aspects of what makes the G League, and that I think that's what really interests me. One of my favorite podcasts, I work in the film industry, and my favorite podcast is Pizza Film School. It's by the Russo brothers, who, if you don't know who they are, they're the guys who've done the Avengers movies. But they, this season, decided to interview their collaborators, whether it's like their casting directors, their cinematographer, editors. So I thought it'd be really interesting to do that with the G League this year for the summer and find different people who work in the G League who do, whether it's coverage or, work different jobs. I'm really passionate about seeing what makes the thing that I love, which is the G League. And to find different people, I think is going to be a great opportunity for this summer. So episode 1, I have Scott Mitchell. He is a reporter for the Long Island Nets. He's a beat reporter, so he pretty much covers the team. And I thought this would be a great episode to talk about the Long Island Nets, to also talk about his career, how he got into journalism, and talk a little bit about their off season. And I'm really excited to be able to talk to Scott, and this is going to be a great interview. So thank you so much. And well, this is the NBA 2K G League show, so feel free to subscribe, like, and just enjoy this video. Thank you, and have a great day. All right, everyone. We are back to the NBA 2K G League show. I'm here with Scott Mitchell. So, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to be able to talk to you. And yeah, I think first, what I always feel like with seeing journalists or reporters, I think there's something about, they have such a passion for basketball. And I think it's very important, for the viewers, for the audience to understand, how did you get into basketball, and just what made you fall in love with the game?
Yeah, so I would say I started playing around third grade. I was average height up until like first, second grade. And then I shot up. I'm 6'8" now, so I'm close to 7 feet tall. Okay. So I was like, I had a few coaches be like, yo, you should play basketball. You should try to play basketball. So I played like outside leagues, kid leagues and whatever you want to call it, for St. Bernard here. I played alongside Anthony Puccio, who became one of my good friends. He's probably one of the top Brooklyn Nets guys around today. I have a lot of respect for everything Pucci has accomplished. And, I went to high school with him. He really took me under his wing, and I'm very grateful for that. And he's one of the best guys I know, truthfully. Him and Bob running the NetsDaily site, Robert Windrum, like two of the best guys I know for sure. But yeah, I just got into it from a young age. I loved playing it. I liked watching it. I was a big Jason Kidd fan, big Vince Carter fan. I liked Richard Jefferson a lot, so I was drawn to the Nets, even though they were never, I mean, I don't know. It's tough because they had a very good team, but they just never really were able to win a lot of championships with it. And that's something we've seen over the years with, obviously more recently with Kevin Durant, Kyrie, and James Harden. That big three came. But I've just always been a Nets fan. I've always been a basketball fan. I loved playing it. I loved watching it. And when I found out I was able to combine my two passions, which is writing and being a journalist, I guess, and basketball, I was all on board for sure.
Wow, and I think that's very neat. Hearing about your journey, and I think too what I noticed was how you also are involved not in just basketball, but I think you cover independent wrestling and even other sports. I guess I was curious, how you got involved in that, but also what it's like covering like basketball versus these other sports.
Yeah, so I got my start actually, ironically enough, with wrestling. Back in COVID time, I used to want to be a wrestler. I was trained for a little bit. I was not cut out to be a professional wrestler, and that's fine. But I decided to like writing because when the world shut down in COVID times, like 2020 ish, I forgot the exact month. It just started like in March. I was trying to figure out, like, I graduated from college in May of 2020, and I was like, this is the worst time to graduate because the whole world was shut down. So I just decided I liked writing. I decided to write more. And, then I got picked up by Daily DT, which is a wrestling company, a wrestling journalism company, like a site. And it was a lot of fun there. I grew from there. I still cover professiononal wrestling, and I love it. Professional wrestling is like my whole other uh, inspiration and my whole other passion for sure. But basketball, I don't know. I've always been drawn to basketball from a young age, and getting to like, it was crazy because I remember, like, I've always been a college basketball guy. So I remember watching Dariq Whitehead on Duke, and then I was sitting across the room with him like 30 times this season, like doing interviews and stuff. And I was like, this is just like wild to me because then I remember Timme, who came in before the regular season, and getting to work with him. And I was like, yo, I love this guy back in Gonzaga. So everyone's like, oh, well, if you're a journalism, you can't be a fan. My biggest thing is none of us would be where we are today if we weren't fans of the sport. So there's nothing wrong with being a fan ever. You obviously need to have your professionalism. You can't be like, oh, can I get your autograph? Like, no, you can't do that, obviously. But when I say be a fan, like, it's okay to be a fan. It's okay to be like, you want these guys to do good. You have people that you like. You have people that you enjoy watching, and that's super important. So when I was able to go to basketball and do basketball journalism, I was like, yo, this is awesome because I remember I was growing up in New Jersey Nets fan. I was always a Brooklyn Nets fan too, but my nostalgia with Jason Kidd, Vince Carter, Richard Jefferson, I was like, yeah, sign me up.
No, that's awesome to hear. I think what's interesting too is you have to shout out. I don't know if you know Satnam Singh. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he played in the G League. I think he played with the Texas Legends back in like 2015. Yeah, because he was the first Indian basketball player drafted in the NBA. So yeah,
that's awesome. Because I've seen his work in the wrestling ring, but that's really cool. Because I know he was. I was like, this guy's a tall dude, so he would be a great basketball player. So that's really interesting, actually. I don't know if I ever knew that about him, but that's really cool.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, but it's very cool, and I think what's interesting is so I think first for people who might not know, what is a beat reporter for the general audience?
So a beat reporter is somebody who, like for me, for example, I go to all the home games. I give all the news about, like, when I get news about the guys on the team, injuries, or someone's playing or someone's someone got called up to Brooklyn, someone got called or sending down to Brooklyn, like that's, or sending down to Long Island from Brooklyn. That's always kind of been my job, is to go on Twitter, report that. I'm with NetsDaily, which is the site, and most of the time, like, they kind of just put me, like, saying like, yeah, you do all Long Island Nets stuff, and I was like, awesome. Like, I love going to Nets games. So dude, that's really what a beat reporter does, is all the breaking news, all the game coverage. I covered every single game, home and away. I was at all the home games. But that's always been like my thing. Is I watch it, I like to write, so I get to combine the two things. And I think that's the biggest job of a beat reporter, is just to deliver news and not be. Look, I know there's a lot of journalists, especially in the wrestling world. For anyone who's watching who might follow wrestling, there's a lot of I don't know the correct terminology, but not the best journalists, to say the least. And, it's the most important thing is just being fair, being unbiased. I'm a Long Island Nets fan, but I'm not going to be like, oh, they are always playing amazing, or, oh, they're always playing terrible. Like, you report on what you see. So you're not going to be like, oh, so-and-so is doing a great job. Meanwhile, they're having a bad game. Bad games happen in sports, but you always want to be 100% factual, 100% truthful, and, just be passionate about what you do.
I think too, I think when it comes to, you were talking about, reporting what you're seeing at the G League level, for audiences, like for general public, what is the difference between covering the G League, and then I guess with the people you work with who cover the NBA, and you maybe from your own experience, is there more leeway in terms of like time you get to spend with players when you're covering the G League versus maybe like the NBA? Like, what are some of the differences that you've kind of seen over your past year?
Well, I love covering the G League for sure because the biggest reason I would say is these guys haven't always reached the NBA yet. I mean, yes, you have Tariq Whitehead, who has been in the NBA, who is recovering from an injury. But the biggest difference is these guys are getting their start most of the time at the G League. If you like, let's say I was working on the Brooklyn Nets with the Brooklyn Nets, I'd be working with Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson. There'd be like 100 reporters around, and it would just be like not as personable. Whereas when I went to the Long Island games, I was one of the only media people there, and I don't say that as a bad thing because I got to work with the players, work with Coach Mufon Udofia, work with GM Matt McDonald a couple times, and you know it's much more personable, much more homey type of feel. Whereas the NBA, I mean, they do their job to make it like feel like they're not rushing you, but you also need to keep in mind there's like 50, 60 reporters probably per press conference. Like it's not just you in a room. Whereas Long Island, I was like I said, I was the only one there, so it was a lot of fun. I loved it, and I like the personal feel of it. That's the biggest difference. Is much more homey, much more personal type of feel.
Yeah, I definitely I feel that because like even if I'm not like I don't report or like cover the team, I went to a lot of the Capital City Go Go games the past 2 years, and something I really love about the Go Go is like they'll at each game at the very end they'll go and just high five all the fans, and I don't feel like that's something you can see at the NBA level. And the fact that they can just go around, high five everybody, they start to remember like who's there. I think that's such a like you're saying a personal aspect of like the G League too.
That's what drew me to the G League as a fan before I even started covering it was just the personal aspect, like very community oriented. Long Island does a fantastic job uh, caring about the community, doing things, outreach programs, doing camps with kids, doing they have a women's camp, like women's kids camp, dance camp with the girls who dance there, and it's very community oriented. And I'm not saying Brooklyn isn't community oriented, but there's a little bit of a difference between the two because Brooklyn you have so many people at, so they can't really be too personal, whereas Long Island can be more personal, can be more outreach to the community, and they do a great job with that for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. So I guess segueing into like the Long Island Nets season, I think we can kind of go into like a season recap. I think what's interesting is I think talk about like summer league. That's kind of where we the start of some of seeing some of these players, right? Like we see like
Yeah.
Mark Armstrong, we see like KJ Jones on that summer league roster, Tyrese Martin, and of course guys who were with Long Island the season before. But how important do you think the summer league is for like Brooklyn and Long Island when it comes to starting to put the pieces together for that roster in the fall?
Oh, the summer league is extremely important. A lot of people like it's not like a big deal to a lot of basketball fans because it's like, oh well, these games don't matter. But a lot of people need to realize like these games matter. Yeah, like you're not gonna be winning championships. You're not gonna be like, a team could do terrible in the summer league and then win the NBA championship. But these games matter because it's about who who's coming up. It's about who's playing well, who's like who you want to have a look at for the regular season for whether it be on Long Island's level or Brooklyn's level. Because I know, like with Mark Armstrong, he was with Long Island all season. KJ Jones, he was waived, and then he wound up in Sacramento. I want to say for the for the G League. But it's really important. Just seeing these guys shine, getting their first chance, some of them, and yeah, people who do well in the summer league, they kind of can get reps in regular season games too. And I mean, we saw Jalen Wilson, Noah Clowney. They came up from Long Island and they're killing it on the NBA level. So you all start somewhere. So sometimes summer league is the biggest place to start.
Yeah, and I think if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Jalen Wilson the summer league MVP too? I
I believe
think.
so. From a couple of years, I don't think it was last year. I think it was a couple years ago, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Pretty sure. I'm just drawing a blank on the exact year.
No, I remember I got to see him play when they came down to play to Go-Go. I was like, wow, he's very good. So yeah, definitely. Well, as you're like covering the team and you start going into the fall, I think, for us as fans, we start to see the exhibit tents and we start to see, oh, okay, like we're starting to see like the formations of the roster. I guess like for you, what is that like when you're covering a team? You start to hear some news. Like, is that kind of the time where now it starts to pick up more for you and you have to start getting more information out?
Yeah, because I would say, yeah, no, definitely. Because I would say right now it's kind of very quiet because truthfully, I mean, I don't know. The NBA G League is tough because it's like after the season ends, everyone goes back into the same pool with the exception of like the two ways and maybe a few other handful, very, very small people. And it's just like, so it's tough because right now, looking at Long Island's Nets rosters for next year, you have no idea who's going to be on it. Like you can assume Tosan is going to still be a two-way, hopefully. Tyson Etienne, maybe Reese Beekman. Beekman, in my opinion, I don't know if he'll still be here because I don't know. I haven't seen too much of him on Long Island, and I didn't see a ton of him up in Brooklyn either. So I don't know if that's a great sign or not. But then you have guys like Drew Timme, who you could bank on still being a part of the Brooklyn Nets organization. So it's definitely a challenging time to be a beat reporter right now because there really is not much going on. Like you can't even be like, oh yeah, let's preview next season, like who's going to be picked and who's going to be on the team because you have no idea who's going to be on the team.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely a quiet time, but come the time that like, players start getting announced for a team, it definitely picks up. And I would say that's like maybe late July, we really start to see players getting announced.
Well, I think too, it's I think also like there's always the 4 affiliate player spots. So I think too, even after the draft, and you'll probably start to see some of the guys who are on summer league because I think if I'm not mistaken, KJ Jones and Mark Armstrong were affiliate players. So, yeah, I think that's even something like. I think it's like it'll be cool once we see like summer league and then we start to see exhibit 10s of seeing how the team starts to form.
Yeah, I'm really paying attention to the Brooklyn Nets draft picks. I know they, trades happen. Maybe they might get some trades. All the draft picks might not be there, but whoever Brooklyn gets in the second round, I would go out on a venture on the record to say 95% sure they'll be in Long Island and they'll be a two-way player because that's kind of how Brooklyn rolls. And I don't know who it's going to be, but when that happens, then I'll start to research this guy because they're more than likely going to be a two-way player. So that means down on Long Island a lot, up in Brooklyn a lot too. So
yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So how do you feel like the team did as we kind of get into the tip-off tournament section?
Yeah.
I know one thing important actually was a big trade they had actually a few trades. So they had Colin Castleton, who was traded to Long Island from South Bay, but then gets immediately called up to the Memphis Grizzlies on a two-way. Then we got Kendall Brown, who they got his returning rights from the Indiana Mad Ants, who I guess now are called the Noblesville Boom. And then the third team, I think, was AJ Lawson, who they got from College Park. So I guess they made a lot of big trades before the season. And obviously Castleton was a huge, I think, probably a big part of like them losing a guy who's probably going to be a starting center. How do you think that affected the team? And do you think it really like hurt the team, or do you think that was kind of anyway like the style that they probably didn't need that type of like center? And because it seemed like they play a lot more wings like Brooklyn. So
Brooklyn is very similar to Long Island. I would say the play style is extremely similar. Very wing heavy, not so many big guys. I mean, Brooklyn has Nick Claxton. Long Island had Drew Timme in the regular season and Patrick Gardner in the tip-off tournament. But the tip-off tournament was bad. the tip-off tournament was just bad. There's no way around it. I mean, I love the Long Island Nets, but they won like 2-14, I think, to start the season. And they knew they had to make a change. And one of the changes, so Amari Bailey getting traded as part of a 3-team trade, which brought Drew Timme in. And, Obviously, we all know how well Drew Timme did. He did fantastic. He had a 50-point game, which was insane. He was, I want to say he was the second. That was the second highest for a Long Island net behind, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but it was Isaiah. I think, was it Isaiah Whitehead or no? It was Isaiah something. And
It might have been Whitehead because it was 2017 to 18, I think,
yeah,
was Whitehead, or 2016, somewhere around there.
yeah, it was something or someone around there. It definitely wasn't Dariq Whitehead. I think it was Isaiah Whitehead.
Yeah, I mixed him up.
I might be blanking on the name, and I do apologize. But the point is, Drew Timme, he was the second highest scoring net. He became like the second Long Island net to be named the Player of the Week, which is massive. And the point is, we saw how he developed on Long Island. We saw him shoot a lot more. We saw him score a lot more, and now we see what he's doing in Brooklyn. And I think he might be. I mean, look, how can you not be excited watching Drew Timme in Brooklyn? Like, obviously, it changes things for Nick Claxton. There's a lot up in the air with that. But if it comes down to it, who do you want to be a starting center, Drew Timme or Nick Claxton? And Claxton is great. I like Claxton a lot, but Drew Timme has been on the tear. And he's, I would say like Timme Mania ran wild in Long Island, and it ran wild. I love they played the South Park Timme sound after every basket he did, and it was hysterical. And the kids loved it. And I was like, you guys don't even know what that means, but that's fine. But it is one of those things where it's like, it is super important for sure. Everyone starts somewhere. Long Island's big thing is development, and even though the tip-off tournament wasn't good in records wise and stuff, they had a good season. And they might not have made the playoffs, but the development was key, and that's super important on the G League level.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, I know I was watching, it was like, oh man, they're struggling. But once I think I saw that big trade, they had that 3-team trade, I was like, oh wow. And every time I see Drew Timme have a big game with Long Island, I just continue to think about the Nets and their scouting department. I'm trying to figure out I'm assuming Brooklyn's scouting department and they all work together as they do these trades. And so I think just huge props to them, honestly.
Yeah, it's they got a good player in Timme, and they got some good trades, but Timme was probably the best trade for them. I would comfortably say that for sure. So, and I'm happy to see everything he's doing up in Brooklyn. He's a great guy, one of the nicest guys I've worked with, one of the best guys I've worked with. And, as someone who followed him from Mr. Fundamental days in Gonzaga, I'm happy to see what he's doing in Brooklyn. And I hope he remains here for a while because he has the potential. He has the potential for sure.
So there was another big trade, I'd say, which I thought was interesting, was seeing Patrick Gardner, who, he's from New York too, and he was with Long Island the year before, and so they traded him for Trayvon Scott from the Oshae Magic. What do you think was behind that trade? Was it just kind of looking at different players, especially because he was there already last year at that point?
Yeah, I think they had an idea. Timme was coming. And I think that when they saw Timme was coming, they're like, all right, we don't really need Gardner to be our big man because we got Drew Timme coming. And they saw a lot more in Timme, I would say, than Gardner. And Gardner is a great player. He just won the championship with the Osceola Magic, I believe. And, I'm happy to see that. But, I think Trayvon Scott did well when he got here. I think it's more about I think they knew they were getting ready to move on from Gardner. And I think they wanted to take a look at a solid four, a solid maybe power forward. Trayvon Scott's a big guy, so he can maybe fill in for a center role too. But Drew Timme was the center. I think they were looking for maybe a solid four or a solid backup to Dariq Whitehead, who did play a lot of the 3 and 4 position on Long Island. So, they definitely – that was a good trade. Looking back on it, Trayvon Scott, he was a good player. He was hit or miss. There was a lot of inconsistencies in his game, but he wasn't a bad player. I'll put it like that. Just sometimes the buckets weren't falling. So
I guess then when we're kind of going into this regular season, I think there were some really cool highlights. And actually, I guess even throughout the tip-off tournament, I was wanting to maybe just talk about the Montreal games, because I know they played some games in Montreal, and I thought that was actually a really unique experience. And I'm curious what it was like covering those games.
Those games were a lot of fun. I wasn't unfortunately able to go in person, but I covered all the games. But from what I heard from the team, they loved Montreal. They would 100% go back. And it was definitely a great partnership between the parent company for the Montreal Canadiens and the Long Island Nets, BSEG, that's the name. I was trying to think of the owners of them. But it's the Canada games were good, and I think it was a deeper meaning than just playing like, oh, let's have Long Island play there. I think it was more about growing the game of basketball in Canada, because I know we have the Toronto Raptors, but to me, like, is this Montreal thinking about a basketball team? Because there's no basketball team in Montreal, but I know like they have one in Toronto, but you got to wonder if this is like their way of like experimenting. How would basketball do up here? And it looked good, and it was packed. They had like 7,000. They had a lot of people on their first game, and then it dropped down to like 5,000 for the rest of the games. But still, it was a ton of people, attendance wise, and the players loved it, the officials loved it, the team officials, I mean, and I would totally see them doing something like that again. I don't know if it'll be Montreal, because I know also this year we saw the Mexico game too that had the largest attendance. I forgot the exact attendance. I think it was like 18,000.
Yeah, the Capitanes.
Yeah. They had like 18 grand, which broke every single record out of the book. And it was an amazing experience. It looked so cool. So maybe like we might see Long Island check with Mexico. Maybe like, this is all a part of growing the game of basketball. And Canada is interested in growing the game of basketball up in Canada. And, it's become popular with European countries too. I mean, we see a lot of Russians in basketball now, Nikola Jokic. There's so many European type of players now, and it's just growing the game. That's the biggest thing. It's just growing the game wherever you can.
Understood. Yeah, I think that's a very important point that you mentioned with Mexico City and with growing a game. I think also we continue to see players who, I think you were talking about Long Island's development as these players are trying to grow their game. And I guess you talked a little bit about Dariq Whitehead, but I was curious, like, your thoughts on how his season went. I think, to my understanding, he wanted to actually play in Long Island this year. So, yeah, I was just curious, like, what you thought about that and his growth as a player.
So every time I spoke to him, he said the biggest thing for him was him stacking days. And stacking days to him meant playing whenever he could, wherever he could. He enjoyed playing a lot on Long Island. Obviously, the goal is always to play in Brooklyn now, so I understand that. Maybe I saw some people unhappy, like on social media, shocking, I know, about about like how he was always getting called up and sent down and called up and sent down. And I get it. I understand it, but from his standpoint personally, like, he just wants to play. And if he's not going to get the playing time in Brooklyn, he wants to play in Long Island. Or on Long Island, I should say. So it's one of those things where, yes, people might have been unhappy with how much he was like fluctuating between the two teams, but he wanted to play. He told me too on record that this was the best he's felt since college, or since like prior to getting drafted, because I know he had the injury and he didn't feel too 100%. He had the 3 surgeries in the span of like 2 years, and this was the best his body felt in a long time, he was telling me. So I'm very happy to hear that. He's still young. He has all the potential in the world, and that's what a lot of people forget. So we'll see if he develops here. We'll see what he does here. But he has a lot of potential, and I'm happy to see. He had a successful year, I would say.
Is he 21? I think
he's 21 or 22. He's around.
Yeah. Yeah, he is young. Okay.
He's super young.
No, totally. I mean, so I guess talking about some of the other guys on Long Island. So I think, Tyson Etienne, he was a huge player. He had some huge games for Long Island this year. And then even like guys like Kendall Brown, who I know he had got injured late in the season, but I know he had got called up to the Nets on a two-way, and then there was also Killian Hayes, who we saw he also got called up, and then he was, I think he have some triple doubles too. Like he was playing really well, his shooting improved. So I was just curious, like what your thoughts were about some of those guys with Long Island.
I would say with Hayes, first and foremost, his shooting was up. He got unceremoniously dumped by Detroit because the shooting was always an issue. I would say after watching his season, you can't really say that anymore because he tore it up on the court. He scored like 30 points, like 20 points regularly. So, and a lot of people are like, oh, well, that's kind of average in the NBA. But, there's a lot of players who score in the teens every single game. Killian was scoring at least 20, 30, 40 points even a couple times. As far as Kendall goes, Kendall was tough because he was very good, but he was inconsistent. Unfortunately, sometimes he's a good player, but the injury I think definitely held him back and definitely kind of stopped him from reaching his potential. And you hate to see that because injuries suck like for anyone. But I'd be curious to see how he plays when healthy because he is a good player. He's not a bad player. He just needs to he needs to work on staying healthy, work on playing the ball. And his shooting was also very well. He was a little inconsistent. Some games he had like 8 points. In other games he had like 30, 40, not 40, but 20 to 30 points. But yeah, he's not, like I said, not a bad player, but he needs to work on some stuff for sure. And as far as Tyson Etienne goes, that's one of my favorite guys to talk about. Because I wasn't negative, but I was like, this guy is just not great. In the tip-off tournament, I was watching this guy play, and I was just like, he was missing so many shots. He just was not playing well at all. And I remember talking to him about that. And I talked to him about it after he started playing so much better. And I was like, dude, it's been like the tale of two seasons for you. And he was laughing. He was like, yeah, no, because like it really was. The tip-off tournament was bad for the whole team. I mean, they went 2-14. There's not much to say about that. You want to see how bad it was. It was 2-14, and they won their first game of the season. So they dropped 14 of their last 15 games of the tip-off tournament, which is not good at all. But it was seeing him develop was probably one of my favorites because he got the two-way deal. He was crushing it on Long Island. He was a star when Killian was up in Brooklyn, and Killian never really returned to form when he came back down. I mean, he had the one big game, but there was a change for sure. Maybe it was a mindset change. Maybe it was something that he was going through mentally. But he's not a bad player by any means. But he didn't really pick up when he got back down to Long Island after he got called up to Brooklyn the first time, Killian. I mean, so Tyson Etienne stepped up, and it was his team. Like, it was really his team after that. When Timme got called up, and it was like the final, I'd say, 5 games of the season, Etienne just crushed it. And then he got called up, and then the final game was just a blowout. But, like, the final game of the year. But no one cares at that point. At that point, it's all about, like, just watching the teams develop, watching them play. And they have a lot of good players, but Tyson Etienne might be my favorite. Killian Hayes had a good year in the beginning for sure too. He shouldn't be overlooked, and I hope he gets another shot.
What's interesting about Tyson too is, I think, in my understanding, this was his 3rd year in the G League, and I think sometimes you can see guys who they play a year, maybe they'll play a 2nd year, and then they decide, okay, you know what, I'm just gonna go overseas. But I think there's definitely a lot of credit to Tyson staying a 3rd year, and then he finally got his opportunity this year. Yeah. And I think I thought it was a really awesome thing to see from a player like him.
Yeah, I really enjoyed covering Tyson Etienne. I remember there was a lot of rough games in the beginning for him, but he turned it around. And when he turned it around, it wasn't inconsistency. He was night in and night out one of the team's top scorers, and that's super impressive to me because he worked on his shot. He knew he was having a downtime, and he was telling me that too. He was like, I know I'm not doing the best by any means. Like, he was like, it was a bad time, but he was able to turn it around, and that's more props to him because a lot of people don't realize it's a huge mindset thing. Because if you get in that mindset of you're not having a great stretch of games, how do you fix it? And he was one of them who was able to fix it, and he crushed it from there on out. And that's why he got to where he is today.
Oh, totally. Well, I think too an NBA champion join Long Island. Oshae Brissett. Yeah, Oshae Brissett. Yeah. What do you think that was like, the impact that just even having somebody who's just in the finals with Boston and then joining Long Island, what do you think that does for an organization like the Long Island Nets?
It definitely made them just more powerful, for sure. Like, they obviously didn't make the playoffs. It was what it was. But when I saw that he got called up to the 76ers, I was happy for him because he's a player who should be consistently playing in the NBA. He's very talented. He's a strong, big guy. He can shoot the ball well when he's on his game. But he definitely influenced Long Island when he came here. He was one of the people who helped to, kind of right the wrongs in the regular season compared to where they were in the tip-off tournament. So I wish him nothing but the best. I didn't really have the chance to work with him that often because I think I worked with him once, and then there was a lot of away games, and then he got called up to Philadelphia. So, I'm glad he's got his chance though back in the NBA. That's super important, and he deserves it. Truthfully, he's a very good player.
As it kind of get towards the end of his season, they added 3 guys, and I know they were only for like 1 or 2 games, but they added a few players. I think it was Bryce Golden, Chris Martin, and Trey King. Do you think with them just adding those few players, it's an opportunity for, I guess, the Nets to look at guys for their summer league, for even having rights for bringing those guys maybe for next year? Because I know some of those guys had played with different G League teams throughout the season too.
Yeah, 100%. It's that really, when they brought them on, now it's just to fill roster spots. And that was just to be like, all right, well, Brooklyn has taken Drew Timme, Brooklyn's taken Tyson Etienne, Brooklyn's calling back Dariq Whitehead. Brooklyn took Tosan back, and so Brooklyn just took all their guys back for the final 2 games because when Long Island got eliminated, they're like, all right, you guys come back, play up here, and show us what you got at the NBA level. So when they brought in those 3 guys, that was really just a chance to look at them. Yeah, but it was also just a way to fill the roster spots. I think Chris Martin, he did well with his time here for sure. He's someone that I think that they definitely got a good look at, and I think he's someone who impressed with his opportunity here. Bryce Golden, he wasn't bad, but he didn't really do too much. And Trey King, kind of similar to Bryce Golden, he was just another body. But Chris Martin, he's someone I would be on the lookout for sure. Maybe to return to the summer league, maybe even Long Island's roster next year. But we'll see what happens. It's a lot up in the air right now.
Yeah. So I guess kind of ending with the season recap, how do you just feel like overall Long Island did just as like the season?
Yeah, I would say obviously you look at the win-loss record. I think they went like 17-19, I want to say was their final record. Not the best. Not the best. But if you look at the development side of things, fantastic. I mean, it's like a tale of two options and stuff because you have Drew Timme. Drew Timme, in my opinion, was the MVP for Long Island for the regular season because there's really no way around it. He was a triple-double machine. He was a double-double machine. He scored a 50-point game. He led the team and sometimes the game in rebounds every single night almost. So it's just, he was someone who I'm very glad to see he got called up to Brooklyn. I had a feeling he was going to get called up to Brooklyn because I'm like, this guy's just way too good. How can you just let him get called up to another team? But I'm very happy to see him stay in the organization. He's one of the nicest guys too. I got the chance to work with, and that's important to me too. Because I mean, yeah, in sports you meet a lot of people who aren't always the nicest people. But I remember he was saying like he was playing FIFA when he found out he was getting called up to Brooklyn. And it just goes to show, like, this guy, like, he loves life. Like, he plays video games. He plays, like, I mean, we all play video games, like to unwind and stuff. So Drew Timme, in my opinion, was the MVP. Killian Hayes did great. I don't want to downplay that. He got called up to Brooklyn. He came back down. He had a couple big games when he came back down, but he definitely wasn't he wasn't where he was in the beginning of the season, but he was still shooting the ball very well. I think it was more my guess, and don't quote me on this because I don't know. I don't know what goes through Killian's head, but it might have been a mindset thing. You know what I mean? Like it might have been like maybe he was a little bummed out that he got the chance to play in the NBA, and then they just kicked him to the curb after the 10-day. So I understand, like, it can be mentally tough and it can be mentally tasking, but Dariq, Whitehead, Killian Hayes, and Drew Timme were my top 3 guys of the season. Tyson Etienne improved so much, and I loved watching him play. Dariq, Whitehead, I loved, like I said, from a fan standpoint, loved seeing everything he did too. But yeah, it was a good year. It was a good year. I mean, yeah, they didn't make the playoffs. They didn't win any championships, but the development was on point, and that's something about Coach Udofia. I think he's one of the best coaches to develop players, truthfully, because he developed Noah Clowney, he developed Jalen Wilson, he developed so many players. And look at this season alone. Like, you got Tyrese Martin, who worked with Coach Mufon a lot. You got Dariq Whitehead, who worked with Coach Mufon a lot, and this was the best Dariq said he felt in a long time. So, Coach Mufon deserves a lot of the credit. And it was a good season, despite the win-loss record. 17 and 19 was just about – they were pretty average. But their development was fantastic.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think, Coach Mufon, I think he did a really great job, as you were saying. And, even last year, this year, like, yeah, I've been very impressed, since he started coaching last year. And I think – something I also thought was interesting, we were saying with Killian Hayes, it's interesting being in the NBA and the G League, because when you're in the G League, like, you have like a bigger role, but when you're in the NBA, that role changes. I think Juan Toscano Anderson said something where he was like the leading guy for the Mexico City Capitanes, and then he gets called up to Sacramento. He's like the 14th, 15th guy now, and it's just interesting. So I always think like that mindset thing I always find fascinating with guys who are like moving between the G League and the NBA and having to like kind of adapt pretty quickly at times.
Yeah, that's something I will give Dariq Whitehead a ton of credit for. Look, you look at this past season alone, he moved. I don't know. There must have been like 6 times he was called up and down. It was insane. They were like, but the thing is, he loved it because, he might not have loved it in the sense of like, oh, I just want to play in the NBA, but he loves playing the game. So any chance he gets to play the game, like if he's not able to play in Brooklyn, he's like, yeah, I'm fine going down to Long Island if I'm starting. So he starts on Long Island. He gets some good minutes on Long Island. And he's someone who didn't have any issue adapting. And Killian Hayes, I think Killian Hayes played very well, and I don't think he did terrible when he got back, but there was just something that changed a little bit about him when he got back, in the sense of like some of his shots were off, some of his passes were off, and like he looked great still. Don't get me wrong, but like when you look at someone and it's like, yeah, I don't know what's going on, but something's like might be going on a little bit there. But he's another player. He's fantastic, Killian Hayes, and he'll. Wherever he lands up next, I hope it's on Brooklyn or Long Island, but if it's not, he's gonna do extremely well, and I have a lot of faith in Killian Hayes to do well for sure.
Yeah, well, I think also speaking of next, I know I sent you this graphic, and I'll put this on screen, but of the Long Island Nets, I was kind of looking through the situation, and so I think we can kind of talk about some of the questions, top out at least what we think we can answer right now. I know. I think it's always important to look at how Brooklyn in that situation that eventually affect Long Island. I think what's interesting is we know Brooklyn has a lot of cap space this summer. Obviously, I noticed a lot of people are throwing this out. They're throwing out Giannis like to Brooklyn. So we see like Giannis hypothetically goes to Brooklyn. Do you think that then changes the way Brooklyn utilizes Long Island and their two-way contract players? Because we see, like, for example, the Lakers, like, they'll bring in guys on two ways who immediately are helping in the regular season. Do you think there's a change when you get like a guy like Giannis or a superstar in Brooklyn?
I think there's very well might be a change. I think it's very possible because when you get that big name in Brooklyn, that automatically takes up like 40 minutes a game, probably close to. So it automatically means that somebody is not going to be playing a lot. And that means that, hey, we're down here. What's up? So then, like, they might send that person down, whoever it might be. And then just to get reps, it could be a two-way player. So just to get reps, just to develop further. Let's say they do land someone like Giannis. It's very possible that, whoever, I don't even know who would be backing up Giannis if they did get Giannis. Would that be? I don't think it would be Timme. I think it would be because let's say they keep Claxton, maybe they'll put Timme at 4.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot up in the air, but whoever's backing up Giannis, however they do the roster next year, that person might find some time on my own. So it's very, very possible if you get a superstar who takes up a ton of minutes. It's extremely possible.
Right. Well, I think also, kind of alluded to this, but also talk about, the Nets. They have, I'll read it out here. Like, they have Brooklyn Nets' draft picks for this year. They have the 8th pick, the 19th pick, the 26th pick, the 27th pick, and the 36th pick. So they have 5 picks in this draft. Do you think also, I know you were saying like the second round pick could be on 2-way contract, but do you imagine, that's if they actually decide to draft all 4 or 5 of these guys, I'd imagine some of those guys would have to be playing for Long Island because there's going to be a lot of players on that team.
That's why I think, like, I'm not, like, to everyone who's watching, don't quote me on this. I don't know. They have 5 picks in the first, or then they have 4 picks in the first round, 5 picks in total. It's extremely possible they land a star. They land a superstar because you know what? If you don't want to use all 4 of your picks, you keep the 8th, or maybe if you trade the 8th and keep the 19th, and you trade a couple of them. But if you trade first round picks, you might get a superstar along with, I don't know what a package would look like for someone like Giannis, because Giannis is a free agent, right? I think. Don't quote me on that.
I think, was it next year he's a free agent, or like his contract ends? Because I think they have to trade him. I think that's the situation. So
yeah, because I know he tweeted on X or on Twitter, whatever the hell you want to call it. He tweeted about someone asked him where he wants to play, and he said New York, and that means the Knicks or the Nets, more than likely.
Right.
So, like, a package for Giannis it would take a lot, but you put like 2 or 3 first round picks in there, I think they would smooth the deal. I think that look, they got 5 picks this year, 4 in the first round. I don't think that they keep all 4. That's my thing. I think they end up moving a couple of the picks, and who they get, maybe it's Giannis, maybe it's another superstar player. I don't know, but 2 first round picks, like let's say they trade 2, that could get you something good. That could get you a good haul for sure.
For sure, that totally makes sense. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting. I think this week I think they're supposed to meet. He's supposed to meet with the Bucks. So yeah, I guess we'll kind of see what happens. But I think also another thing I think for fans with Long Island and Brooklyn is you have your 3 2-way contract players. I guess how important is this summer league for them? Because I'd imagine when you're drafting 5 guys, I would think that that's also going to impact some of these guys too, because we see like a lot of times it feels like guys end up playing summer league the summer after that G League season, but then they don't come back that fall because they end up going somewhere else. So do you think, I guess, with them drafting all these players, could that also impact how do you think that would impact that summer league, and especially with these 2-way players currently that are on contract?
Yeah, I think the 2-way players, whoever they get to be their 2-way players, because I'm not completely sold that Reese Beekman is staying. I think that opens up another 2-way spot. Then you have Tyson, Etienne, and Tosin Awoma, who we'll see what happens there. But let's say they do draft another 2-way player, which would be in the second round if they do, with their 36th pick. I would venture to say, like, the summer league is extremely important for them, 100%, because that's where you get their first look. The coach officials or the team officials are watching them. And, I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, well, the stars aren't really playing in the summer league. Yeah, I guess, but you also need to keep in mind, like, you're not watching the summer league to see LeBron James. You're watching the summer league to see guys who might take that next year, I should say, or this year, whatever you want to consider. But yeah, I think the summer league is extremely important, especially for the two-way players who might have more hype behind them. Because when you get drafted, when you're named a two-way player, you are instantly looked at. Like, you're instantly going to be someone who's like, all right, well, let's see how you develop in Brooklyn. And sometimes they might take the two-way away from someone because they play poorly. I don't think they would do that in the summer league, but it's very possible. It's very possible. But yeah, the summer league is extremely important for really anybody. Two-way players more so because you have more hype behind your name. But it's really the first chance that they see to see how these guys play in an NBA type of game.
For sure. No, totally. And I think you did talk about us, but talk about Coach Mufon. I think what's always interesting is seeing how guys who are coaches, how they go into a third or fourth year. We don't know if he's going to be back next year, but I think you did talk about the positives, which was, he did a really great job developing guys. And I think that is a huge win. And I think, just kind of speaking of that, like, I would hope to see him next year because if he's done such a great job, you would think Brooklyn would be interested in keeping him. But then at the same time, you never know if he also gets his own call up. So, I think there's always the interesting part about when you're like looking at an off season, you never know, like these type of things can happen. Like he gets called up and then, or if they want to look at other coaches as well.
100%. I would hope that Coach Mufon stays in Long Island. I don't know. Now, if he will, I don't know. Like, I don't know if, because the call up is very possible. It can happen for the coaches just like it happens for the players. When you see his track record on how he develops guys, how he brings guys back from injury, guys like Dariq Whitehead, who has been battling injuries, played his first pretty much fully healthy year. He might have missed a game here and there, like every single other player. But Dariq Whitehead played, I would say, over 70 games, at least over 70 games this year. And what more can you really ask for in that? Because it's like, someone who had 3 surgeries on his leg in 2 years. He developed well. He played well. And I think that's a lot of credit to Coach Mufon because, you have these guys who are looking for their second chance or looking for their first chance in the NBA. And Coach Mufon gets them ready. I mean, you can see that with Noah Clowney, who's now a mainstay with Brooklyn. You can see that with Jalen Wilson, who's also a mainstay in Brooklyn. You can't say enough good things about Coach Mufon. The win-loss record might not have been there, but the development speaks for itself. We saw it with Drew Timme this year. Drew Timme was having an average year with, I want to say, I'm trying to blank on the team. Stockton or Iowa. It was one of the two. Because I know it was a 3-team trade.
Yeah, Stockton, and then Bailey went to Iowa, I think, and Chase and Randall went to Stockton. So, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so, but the point is, Drew Timme and Stockton, he was playing, he wasn't bad, but he was like average, very average. He came to Long Island, completely took off. And that's a large credit thanks to Coach Mufon Udofia's development program, how he pushes these guys to do better and how he gets them ready for the next level and how he gets them ready to do better. Because Drew Timme came here. He didn't even play a full season here. He got called up before the end of the season. So, it's awesome. And I'm very happy for him. And I think that's a lot of credit to Coach Mufon for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think the last time I was going to bring up with their off season was, I think just for fans who, the way kind of a G League roster starts to form is, right, we were talking about there's 4 affiliate player spots, and then they have draft picks. So I kind of looked at their draft picks. I think what happened was when they made this Tyrese Martin trade last summer, they traded away their first pick or their first round pick, and I think it was their second round pick in this upcoming draft. But then they were able to get a pick back through Colin Castleton going to Osceola. So I think that pick would be landing about, 27, 28, 29 for 30th because I think it's a 4-way tie between like 4 teams at the top. So I guess I think what's interesting about looking at like say the draft is you see, it might not be a lot because some of those guys don't end up making it the final roster anyway. But I think it's just interesting because sometimes some guys do make the final roster, and maybe some of them end up actually eventually like playing so well that they do move into Brooklyn. So I know they have that pick. I believe they also own Windy City's pick, which is about the 33rd pick in the draft this year. Obviously, this is as of right now. So what I think is important too, like when you look at rosters, is we're going to start to see like the returning rights of all the guys they have, which they have some guys who played last season, like Kyler Edwards, Cameron Hankerson, and then obviously like Terry Roberts, who I know he's been with the Nets this past 2 years, but I think you have these returning rights, so I think those are ways that, like, for example, there's a different G League team or NBA team that wants to like bring in Killian Hayes. Then that's a way they could get his returning rights. Maybe get like a draft pick, or get the returning rights of a different guy. So I think it's interesting when we're looking at like how these rosters start to form with all the returning player rights they have, the draft picks, and then you start to see like the pieces start to like gradually form after. Honestly, it seems like after the draft, I'd say. So yeah, I guess I don't know if you have any thoughts too about like how roster construction that I didn't add or anything you want to add to that, but yeah, I think it is interesting like how these rosters start to gradually form.
Oh, it's extremely interesting because in every single sport you have guys that will be back on the team next year, and you have guys that might get traded. But that, like, in football, with the Jets, Alan Lazard, he might get traded, but otherwise he'll be back on team. With the G League, you don't know that. The G League is tough because at the end of the season, everyone goes back into this pool minus a few of the guys, and then you kind of start from scratch. And it's just like, it's really cool to see how the roster construction is because, last year we had the likes of Tyson, Etienne, Timme, Dariq, Whitehead, Killian Hayes, Kendall Brown, guys like that, right? We might not have any of those guys. And that's the thing. So that's part of the G League, and that's what makes it fun because, we might get Amari Bailey back. We might get, because anything's possible. All these guys go in the pool, and then you're looking for whoever you want. So the roster construction is pretty interesting, and the G League draft is pretty interesting to see how that will play because you don't really know. You can't like speculate because you don't really know what their needs are going to be for the G League draft because you don't know who's on the team yet.
Right.
But it's one of those things where it's like, like a guy like Killian Hayes, absolutely, I would love to have him back on Long Island if he would want to be back, obviously. But it's definitely a very interesting concept that you don't see in any other sport because every other sport you have your set roster minus free agents, RFAs, UFAs, that whole jargon. But this sport, the G League, I should say, not sport, but the G League in particular, you don't have that. You have guys who are maybe tops 3 guys who might be on your team for next year. And they're the two ways. So, and even still, Reese Beekman, I'm not sold on him staying. So they might only have 2 guys. But it's interesting because roster construction, like, you don't know who's going to be on your team yet. So when that starts coming out, you'll start picking up the pieces, and you'll be like, all right, well, they have this, they might need this, or this looks really good. I'm happy they have this. It's interesting because then you have the 2025 NBA draft in June, where Hanson Yang, he's very talented, 7'1", barefoot, which he's a legit big guy. And the Nets have had a Chinese player on their team every year, and I think that's part of the global aspect of it that they love to follow. And Joe Tsai has said that, like, he wants a Chinese player on the team every year, and they're playing a preseason game in China this coming season in Brooklyn. So it's very possible to see them draft someone like Yang or draft someone of the Chinese culture who is not just like a market piece, but someone they could push, someone they could see how they develop, but also someone that they could reach into a whole new. Because we saw that last year with Jackie, and Jackie, I mean, he's another one. Could he be back? It's possible. I think it's very possible that Joe Tsai has literally said himself, like he wants to have a Chinese player on the team every year, and because it's a cultural aspect thing, and it's interesting. So if that's the case, then I think Hanson Yang, I believe Yang is a pretty good option. Pretty good. He's very talented. He's a good big guy, but he has a few quirks in his game. But someone I think could be a big asset to them for sure.
Yeah, no, I love Hansen Young. Like I watched his game last year at Summer League when they were playing, I think in Sacramento, Team China. And I was like, wow, I'm very impressed. And I saw he signed with Clutch Sports. Like, oh, okay, that's a good sign too. So yeah, that's very exciting. So yeah, let's see. But I guess getting to my last thing, I was just gonna kind of do a lightning round of a few questions. And so I guess the first one is, what advice would you give to someone starting off like in the field of journalism and reporting?
Stick with it. There's going to be a lot of times where you don't know if this is what you want to do because you're not getting anywhere. Stick with it, because I was in those shoes before where I didn't have anyone reaching out to me to work for them, and I was just trying to hope to find my way. Found myself with Long Island Nets, with NetsDaily, I should say, covering Long Island Nets. So my biggest piece of advice would be not to give up, as cliche as it sounds, and stick with it, because, it's possible. For anyone, it's possible, so you might as well make it possible for you. So.
Oh, totally. And then the second question is, who was your favorite interview that you had this season? Like interview, I guess, guests, or like when you were doing your post-game interviews, like who was somebody that you really liked talking to a lot?
So after the cure for the Long Island cancer game, where they had the colorful jerseys, the purple jerseys, great. It was a great charity event. It was a great event for the fighting against cancer. I got to work with Timme and Dariq Whitehead. Those at the same time, I remember just sitting in the chair. They were sitting in front of me at the table, and just seeing them. It was right after Dariq Whitehead hit the game-winning three with like under 2 seconds left. So seeing how hyped he was, it was so much fun. And Timme was hyped, and seeing them together, I loved it. They were very good. The connection was there, very great to talk to, very awesome to work with. And I would say then that interview for sure with both of them was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. No, that really is. So, and then another question I gotta ask, because this is the NBA 2K G League show. Do you play 2K?
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. So, what is like? Do you play as like Brooklyn? Do you have any like favorite players or any favorite teams? Or
so I'm kind of going to expose myself here a little bit. I did the franchise mode. I have a couple franchise modes loaded up. Actually, I have the New Jersey Nets with Jason Kidd and Vince Carter and Richard Jefferson, which I hate that because you always have to trade for Carter or trade for Jefferson. I had to trade for one of the two because they never put him, like, even though they were on the same team, they never put him. And I think that's because I'm pretty sure it's Vince Carter, because they always put him with the Raptors. So you always need to go out and trade for him in the game. So I always do that. And it's always costing an arm and a leg, which is annoying. Mm-hmm. But I also have the Brooklyn one from this year. But I traded almost everyone except Cam Johnson and Cam Thomas, because I brought in guys like Killian Hayes, Kendall Brown, and I just ran with it. I was just like, yeah, that's good.
I mean, that's what I do. Anyway. I literally just played the G League and 2K. That's always my thing. So
I enjoy that, but I hate that. Like, I mean, I wish 2K would have like an actual G League, because I know they have the WNBA with Liberty. I think it'd be cool if you can actually play as a G League, because you might be as a G League, but the players are never matched up.
Yeah, I don't know too much. If you like know, there's like in my league you can do G League as an option, but then there was a thing they did 2K this year where there was a way where guys who were on like the console, like people who played console people who played on a PC were able to do a transfer thing where if you made a scenario on my league and then made all the jerseys and courts, they could transfer it to console, and that's not supposed to happen. So then that's awesome. 2K, like I don't think they were going to try to fix it for this 2K. So what they did was they took the G League and they would try to then make it available and play now as long as you just download the roster and
Yeah.
it works as like a play now. So then people were able to like do like NCAA, they were able to do like EuroLeague, like the
That's
G
awesome.
League. So
I didn't even realize they could do that.
yeah, I mean, supposed to do it, yeah, for this year, but hopefully next year. Hopefully it'll still be there, but yeah.
No, but it also was rough because I was able to find AJ Lawson, Killian Hayes, Kendall Brown, but there was a lot of guys I wasn't able to find. Like Drew Timme's not in the game. Like there was a lot of guys on the team that I liked who I wasn't able to find. I don't think Tyson Etienne's in the game.
I think they are now, but as creative players.
Yeah.
Like they don't have their skin. I think Drew Timme, I have a feeling, has a face scan, given that he was a pretty big player in college, so they might have like scanned him at Summer League a couple of years ago. But hopefully, I mean, I would really love like 2K to scan more guys who played in the G League the year before. Yeah, that'd be really awesome if like for next 2K, if Timme or Tyson, if they get like into the game as like a more of like a not creative player, but like as a scan player.
Yeah, I'm also a card guy, like a physical card. So I've been collecting the guys I worked with so far, and I have like a Dariq Whitehead section. I'm building a Drew Timme section, but he's another one. Like his only cards are from Gonzaga, so
nice.
I would like to see them do more with the G League and the physical collectibles too. Like, because it's fun. People like to collect stuff. People like to play as their favorite G League team, whether it be the capital city or Long Island Nets or Stockton or Iowa, really anyone. But, I think that's another avenue they should explore. For sure.
For sure. Yeah.
I was looking at the Brooklyn franchise, and I looked at the G League team.
Mm.
I didn't know any of the players.
Yeah.
It wasn't like real. That's saying it wasn't real players. It was it was in the franchise mode, so it was just like random.
Right.
But it was. I love it.
No, totally. And then I guess the last question in the lightning round I want to ask is, so I work in the film industry, so I have to ask, but do you have a favorite movie or TV show or anything you've seen recently? This also doesn't have to be basketball related too, so whatever like comes to mind.
So I have a favorite genre of movies. I like a couple of movies. I mean, I kind of grew out of the Fast and Furious, but I like the action movies a lot. I like stupid movies like Zombieland too. Like that's like my guilty pleasure because that's so dumb, but it's funny because it's like I like that. Like I mean, I'm not the biggest drama guy. I'm not the biggest horror guy because I'm a baby. But no, it's also like the story. I like a good movie with a good story. I would say if you're looking for names, I really like Top Gun Maverick a lot. I saw that in theaters. That was terrific. That was terrifically done. The CGI, the effects, it was fantastic. I'm big, and I also I saw Twisters too recently with Glenn Powell.
Oh yeah,
another one. Great effects, great, and stuff like that. Like it's just amazing to me. So I would say like the stuff that really draws me in is just the effects, like San Andreas with The Rock, like, and seeing how well they did with like the buildings falling and everything. I'm like, this looks insane. Like this looks really well done. So that's like kind of what drew me into those type of movies. But I also like the stupid humor movies, like Get Hard with Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
or the other guys with Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell. Yeah. Step Brothers is a classic. That's that's the extent of it. I like the action-y type movies and comedy, the stupid humor sometimes.
Nice. Yeah, no, I think those are awesome, especially like they're just, you can kind of get like really lost, I think, too, in them, like in a good way. Like they're really just distracting. It's just fun, like to just watch something like this.
I was in Delaware this past weekend and we were in a tornado warning for a crazy storm.
Oh.
So, thankfully it's fine. Like there was no tornado near the house or anything. It was just like a wild storm. And I don't know who came up with the brilliant idea, but I just put on the movie Twisters too, and we just watched it. And I was just like looking outside the window, and I just saw everything going crazy. And I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea.
Well, they have to cut to when it stops. So.
Oh god, that was funny. I also like the Rocky movies. Those are like the OG Rocky. So pretty fun.
Yeah.
I don't like. I mean, the Creed ones aren't bad. But I think like when you make too many of them, it's like, all right, same story. Like Rocky 1 to 4 was great. I think, after that, it kind of went downhill. I really like the Russian guy, the movie with the Russian guy,
Yeah.
because that had a great story in it.
Mm.
But, I mean, how many times can you make the same story about,
Right.
he wins the fight at the end? Yeah, woohoo.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you know what's going to happen. And I'm a wrestling fan saying that, but,
Yeah. No, for sure. It's funny because one of my friends is really into wrestling too, so I know a good amount about it. Like I think George Mason University, they'll host like AEW here in Virginia, or WWE, and I know he had gone up to Long Island, I think to the Coliseum for some events. Like I think it was WWE. I didn't know if they were doing like a pay-per-view broadcast show, or
in December they did Saturday Night's main event.
Okay.
Yeah, that was like it was like one of their big shows. It was on TV. It wasn't like a pay-per-view, but it was like still a pretty popular show for them. So because it was like a weekend show. It wasn't like Raw or SmackDown. It was like a Saturday night show. So
I don't have any more questions, so thank you so much, Scott. This was just great talking to you. Just hearing about your experiences, like being a reporter, a journalist, and just covering it. I think what's really cool, and like why I want to do this like series of interviews, is just to be able to hear about like the different people who covered like the G League, the different people who do stuff for the G League. Because I love the G League, and it wouldn't be here without like people who are do what you do. So again, thank you so much, and
thank you.
Really, really appreciate being able to talk to you today.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you so much for even asking me to do this show, because I think it's super important to like promote the G League and just love what you love, share what you love, share the G League, follow the G League. The G League is a lot of fun. Everyone starts somewhere. And, you could say that you saw Drew Timme's first game in Long Island, and that was the first game of the rest of his career, because guess what? Now he's on Brooklyn. So, yeah, I mean, follow the G League, support the G League for sure, and love what you love the team you love, and yeah, that's really it. Don't be on Twitter being like, oh, F this team. Like, just promote what you love instead of bashing what you hate. That's what I always say.
Totally. No, that's awesome. Yeah, for sure. But again, thank you so much, and yeah, have a great day, man.
Thank you. You too. It's a pleasure.